Chapter 1. Under the dim light of the street lamp. The city of Sao Paulo never sleeps. Under the dim light of the street lamps, the streets take on a shadowy life, filled with secrets and silence. It was precisely in this environment that Rafael Ferreira, a detective marked by invisible scars, found his place. At 42, his sharp eyes and silent steps were his trademarks. That night, Rafael was in his office, a cramped space filled with old papers and archived cases. When the phone rang, he answered, knowing that any call after 10 p.m. rarely brought good news. "Ferreira," his hoarse voice responded. "It's Chief Martins. We have a crime scene in Bella Vista. I need you here, and quickly." Rafael sighed, grabbing his worn leather coat and the fedora that always accompanied him. The light rain made the air feel heavier. He arrived at the scene to find the yellow police tape surrounding a dark alley. The flashes of forensic cameras gave brief glimpses of a brutal scene. The victim was a middle-aged man, apparently homeless, with signs of a fierce struggle. Blood stained the ground red, and the body was laid out in an almost ritualistic manner. "Ferreira, this is different," said Chief Martins, a burly man with tired eyes. "Look at this." He pointed to a symbol drawn in blood on the wall. It was a circle with a line through it, simple yet disturbing. Rafael crouched down, studying the symbol. "Have you seen this before?" he asked.
No.
"And that's what worries me. It seems we're dealing with something new." As the forensic team worked, Rafael scanned the surroundings, searching for anything that might have been left behind. His eyes caught a small piece of paper tucked under a cardboard box. He picked it up and read quickly. "Just the beginning." "What do we have here, Rafael?" asked Julia, the medical examiner, approaching. Her green eyes shone with curiosity behind her glasses. "A message," he replied, handing her the paper. "And a signature from someone who wants to be found." The night wore on as Rafael analyzed every detail. The words on the note echoed in his mind. He knew he was just beginning to unravel a complex and dangerous plot. Before leaving, he cast one last look at the crime scene. The symbol, the note, the brutality, everything indicated that this would not be a typical case. Rafael's instincts told him there was much more behind this murder, something that would challenge his skills and force him to confront his own demons. The rain continued to fall as he walked away, ready to follow the tracks left by a killer who seemed to know the shadows as well as he did. The investigation had only just begun, and Rafael was prepared to dive deep into yet another enigma shrouded in mystery. Chapter 2. Clues in the Dark. With the gray morning of Sao Paulo bringing a light fog, Rafael returned to his office. The images of the crime still danced in his mind. He knew he needed to act quickly, as the killer seemed willing to continue their macabre game. In the office, Rafael began examining the files of unsolved cases that might have some link to the enigmatic symbol. It was tedious work, but necessary. He knew that every clue, no matter how small, could bring him a step closer to the killer. Meanwhile, Julia, the medical examiner, called. "Rafael, I performed the autopsy. There's something you need to see." Upon arriving at the morgue, Rafael found Julia beside the victim's body. She pointed to a small cut on the man's forearm. "This was made before death. It looks like a code, but I'm not sure what it means." Rafael studied the cut. It was a strange pattern, almost like a set of numbers or letters. "Someone is sending a message," he murmured. "I thought the same," said Julia. "But why would someone leave such a subtle message if they wanted to be found? Maybe because they want to be discovered only by someone who knows where to look," replied Rafael thoughtfully. "I'll need your help to decipher this." Rafael spent the afternoon analyzing the cut, comparing it with known symbols and codes. The hours passed, and he felt he was getting closer to something significant. The phone rang again, breaking his concentration. Ferreira, it's Chief Martins. We have another victim. Same signature. Raphael felt a chill. Another murder so quickly? He knew this was a direct challenge from the killer. He gathered his things and rushed to the new crime scene, this time in an abandoned park. The scene was similar, but the victim was different, a young woman, apparently unconnected to the first man. The same symbol was drawn in blood, and again there was a small cut on her arm. As the forensic team worked, Raphael found another piece of paper, this time tucked into the victim's pocket. "We are still just beginning," the note read. The detective knew he was dealing with someone meticulous and cruel. Every detail was planned, every victim chosen for a reason. Raphael turned to Martins. "We need to find out what these victims have in common. There's something we're missing." The night wore on, and Raphael continued to seek answers in the shadows. Each clue pulled him deeper into the labyrinth the killer had created. And as he tried to piece it together, one thing became clear. The game was far from over, and time was against him. Thus ended another day in the life of Raphael, the detective who faced not only the city's criminals but also his own inner demons, as trails of blood guided his path in the darkness. Chapter 3: Shadows of the Past. Dusk began to fall over Sao Paulo, bringing with it the darkness Raphael knew so well. Back in his office, he started connecting the dots between the two murders. The pattern was clear. The killer wanted to play, to leave Raphael in a labyrinth of clues and codes. As he studied the cuts on the victim's arms, a memory from the past emerged. Raphael remembered a case from 5 years ago, when a serial killer known as the Poet left encrypted verses on his victims. He had been captured, but something about these cuts reminded Raphael of the old case. Could it be a copycat? Raphael asked himself as he flipped through the old Poet files. But the Poet never used blood symbols, only verses. Perhaps it was a coincidence, but Raphael knew that coincidences rarely were just that. Raphael decided to visit an old friend, Anna, a cryptography expert who had helped in the Poet case. Her office was in an unassuming building in the city center, surrounded by old books and state-of-the-art computers. "Raphael, what a surprise!" Anna smiled upon seeing him. "Still chasing ghosts?" "Unfortunately, yes," he replied, handing her the photos of the cuts. "I need your help to decipher this. It's a message, but I can't see the pattern." Anna adjusted her glasses and studied the images for a few minutes. "Interesting," she murmured. "It looks like a numeric code, but it's fragmented. I need more time to analyze it." "Time is something we don't have much of," said Raphael. "But anything you can discover could be the difference between catching this killer before he strikes again." Back at the precinct, Raphael found Martins and the team setting up an investigation board with information about the two victims. The connections were still nebulous, but the pressure to find a clear lead was mounting. Raphael sat down at the table with Julia. "We need to find out who these people are. There's something linking them, and we need to figure out what it is." Julia nodded, looking at the photos of the victims. "Let's start with the families. Maybe they know something we don't." The interviews with the families revealed few details. The young woman was an art student, and the homeless man was a former history professor who had fallen from grace. No obvious connection. But when Raphael heard about the professor's passion for cryptography and ancient codes, something clicked. Late that night, Raphael met Anna back at the morgue, who had new findings. "The code is fragmented, but I managed to decipher part of it," said Anna. "It looks like a coordinate, but it's incomplete." "What does that mean?" asked Raphael, trying to make sense of the pieces. "It means we need to find the other pieces of the code to understand the full message. The killer is guiding us, piece by piece." Raphael knew that time was running out. With each new clue, the killer seemed always a step ahead. But he also knew that the truth was out there, in the shadows, waiting to be discovered. As the night wore on, Raphael promised himself that he wouldn't stop until the killer was found. The game was far from over, and he was determined to win no matter the cost. Chapter 4: Interviews with Shadows. The next morning brought a heavy, gray sky, as if the city itself was reflecting the weight of the mystery. Raphael, staring out the window of his office, knew he had to act quickly. Every lost minute meant another step for the killer to hide in the shadows. Raphael and Julia decided to start with the family of the young art student. Her home was a simple apartment, decorated with vibrant paintings and modern sculptures. Her mother, a middle-aged woman with tear-reddened eyes, greeted them. "Please sit down," the mother said, indicating the sofa. "I still can't believe she's gone."
Rafael nadie empathetically.
"I'm sorry for your loss. We'll do everything we can to find who did this. May we ask you a few questions?" The mother nodded, wiping away tears. "Of course. Did she mention anything strange recently? Anyone new in her life? Anything out of the ordinary?" Raphael began, his voice calm and professional. The mother thought for a moment. She mentioned a cryptography professor who was helping her with a project. She said he was very intelligent and was teaching her about ancient codes. "Do you know his name?" asked Julia. "She only called him Professor. I don't know his full name, but she had a notebook where she wrote everything down. It's in her room." The notebook was a goldmine of information. Among notes from classes and sketches, there were several references to a man named Dr. Enrique Valenca, a specialist in cryptography and ancient codes. Back at the precinct, Raphael began investigating Dr. Valenca. He found that Valenca had an impeccable reputation in academia, but there were rumors of involvement in clandestine circles of code breakers. Raphael decided to visit him. Valenca's house was an old mansion with well-tended gardens and a library that seemed from another century. Valenca, a tall man with gray hair and round glasses, greeted them with a cordial smile. "Detective Ferreira, I've heard a lot about you," said Valenca, shaking Raphael's hand. "What can I do for you?" "Dr. Valenca, we're investigating the murder of one of your students, a young woman named Clara," said Raphael, closely observing the professor's reactions. Valenca seemed genuinely surprised. "Clara? Oh my God, she was a brilliant student. It's terrible. She mentioned you were helping her with a cryptography project. Can we see your class records and recent projects?" asked Julia. Of course," said Valenca, leading them to the library. "Here is everything I have on our studies." Raphael meticulously examined the documents. Among the papers, he found notes by Clara referring to an ancient manuscript, a rare book that Valenca owned. The notes mentioned symbols similar to those found at the crime scenes. "Dr. Valenca, we need to take these documents for analysis," said Raphael. "Of course, anything to help," replied Valenca. But there was something in his eyes that made Raphael feel there was more to uncover. As they left the mansion, Julia looked at Raphael. "Do you think he's involved?" "I don't know yet, but he definitely knows more than he's saying," replied Raphael. "Let's see what Anna can decipher from these documents." The investigation advanced, and the feeling of being drawn into a deadly game intensified. Raphael knew time was against him, but he also knew that each new clue brought him closer to the truth. The shadows held secrets, and he was determined to illuminate every one of them. Chapter 5: A Dark Past. The ride back to the precinct was silent, each person lost in their own thoughts. Clara's notes about the rare manuscript found in Valenca's library were now in Anna's hands, the cryptographer. Anna examined the pages with an intense gaze. "This is fascinating," she murmured, as Raphael and Julia waited anxiously. "It appears to be an encrypted text, but with a structure that dates back to ancient codes used in secret societies. Can you decipher it?" asked Raphael. "It will take some time, but yes, I believe I can," replied Anna. "There's something more in these documents that seems connected to a larger network of information." While Anna worked, Raphael decided to dig deeper into Dr. Valenka's past. In the police database, he discovered that Valenka had been mentioned in an old case involving the disappearance of historical artifacts, although he was never formally accused. Raphael and Julia decided to visit an old friend who might help. Luis, Raphael's former partner in the police, now ran an antique shop specializing in rare and ancient artifacts. They found him in his store, a place filled with curious objects and relics from the past. "Raphael, it's been a while," said Luis, embracing him warmly. "What brings you here?" "We're investigating a complicated case," replied Raphael, handing Luis a photo of Valenka's manuscript. "Have you seen anything like this before?" Luis adjusted his glasses and studied the photo. "This is quite rare. It looks like a codex used by an ancient secret society in Europe, known for their advanced knowledge in cryptography and alchemy." "What else do you know about this society?" asked Julia. "Not much," replied Luis. "They were very secretive, but there are rumors that they had access to forbidden knowledge and that many of their members disappeared mysteriously." Raphael pondered over this information as they returned to the precinct. The connection between the manuscript and the secret society could be the key to understanding the murders. But there was something more, something personal that was intimately linked to him. At home, Raphael looked at an old photo on his bedside table. It was of his wife, Sophia, who had disappeared 5 years ago under mysterious circumstances. The case was never solved, and he always felt there was more behind her disappearance. The link to the current case was clear in his mind. The modus operandi, the symbols, everything seemed to bear the mark of someone who knew his past, someone who wanted to challenge him directly. The next morning, Anna had news. "Raphael, I managed to decipher part of the code. It's a geographic coordinate pointing to a location outside the city. It looks like an old abandoned farm." Raphael knew this was the next step. "Julia, let's investigate this farm. We need to find out what the killer is hiding there." Night fell as they headed to the indicated location. The farm was shrouded in darkness, with a heavy and silent atmosphere. Raphael knew they were getting closer to the heart of the mystery. Each step took them deeper into the shadows, closer to the truth he both feared and yearned to uncover. Chapter 6. The Abandoned Farm. The old farm looked like a scene straight out of a nightmare. With its broken windows and doors creaking in the wind, it was the kind of place where shadows hid long-buried secrets. Raphael and Julia, flashlights in hand, walked along the overgrown path leading to the entrance. "This place gives me the creeps," commented Julia, adjusting her flashlight to better illuminate the way. "That's exactly what the killer wants," replied Raphael, his voice low and steady. "Let's find out what he's hiding here." The main door groaned as it was pushed open, revealing a dark, dusty interior. The air was filled with the smell of mold and rotten wood. Raphael advanced, observing every detail. They needed to be quick, but cautious. In the center of the room, an old table was covered with papers and maps. Raphael immediately began examining them. They were old maps of the city, with several markings indicating specific locations. "Look at this," said Julia, holding up a yellowed sheet. "It looks like a journal." Raphael took the journal and began to read. The pages were filled with notes on experiments, codes, and references to an order of shadows. The words spoke of a quest for forbidden knowledge and a series of ancient rituals. "This confirms our suspicions about the secret society," said Raphael. "But why now? And why these victims?" As Raphael flipped through the pages, a sound from upstairs caught his attention. They exchanged a look, knowing they were not alone. They climbed the creaky stairs, their flashlights illuminating the narrow path. At the top, they found a room full of radio equipment and documents. In the center of the room, a hooded figure stood with its back to them, fiddling with something on the table. "Police! Hands where I can see them!" shouted Raphael, pointing his gun. The figure turned slowly, revealing a young, frightened face. "Please don't shoot. I'm Pedro, a student. They forced me to do this." "Who are they?" asked Julia, keeping her gun trained on him. "I don't know their names," said Pedro, trembling. "They found me at the university. They talked about ancient knowledge, something no one else knows. They threatened me if I didn't help decipher the codes." "Are you involved in the murders?" asked Raphael.
No.
"I swear I'm not. They just used me to decipher the codes," responded Pedro desperately. "But I discovered something. They are planning something big, something that involves a ritual with the next victims." Raphael and Julia knew they needed to act quickly. "Where is the next ritual going to take place?" asked Raphael. "I don't know the exact location, but they mentioned something about the ruins of the old theater in the city center," said Pedro. Raphael and Julia brought Pedro back to the precinct for protection. Time was running out, and they needed to find the ruins before the killer made his next move. Chapter 7: The Theater of Shadows. The streets of Sao Paulo blurred by as Raphael and Julia sped towards the city center. Pedro's information about the next ritual led them to the old theater, an abandoned building that once was one of the city's most vibrant cultural spots. Now, its dark ruins were a refuge for mysteries and dangers. Arriving at the location, the imposing facade of the theater was covered in graffiti and vegetation. The air was heavy with an unsettling silence, broken only by the distant sound of nighttime traffic. Raphael and Julia exited the car, guns drawn, and advanced cautiously. "Are you ready for this?" asked Raphael, looking at his partner. "Ready as ever," replied Julia with determination. They pushed open the huge doors, which creaked loudly. The interior was engulfed in darkness, except for a few beams of light streaming through the broken windows. The stage, once a place of many performances, now looked like a scene of horror. In the center of the stage there was a circle drawn with strange symbols, similar to the ones Raphael had seen before. In the middle of the circle, there was a wooden chair, and on it, tied and gagged, was a young woman, her eyes wide with terror. "It's a trap," Raphael murmured, looking around, his senses on high alert. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, a tall man with a sinister smile. "Welcome, detective," he said, his voice echoing through the theater. "I've been expecting you." Raphael kept his gun trained on him. "Let the girl go and surrender. It doesn't have to end like this." "Oh, but it does," the man replied. "You don't understand. It's all connected. The victims, the symbols, even you, Raphael. It's all part of a grand game." As he spoke, more hooded figures appeared, surrounding Raphael and Julia. The tension in the air was palpable. "Julia, cover me," Raphael ordered, moving slowly towards the man. Julia kept her gun pointed, ready for any movement. "Don't move," she shouted at the hooded figures. Raphael was a few meters away from the man when he raised a hand, revealing a detonator. "One step closer and she dies," he threatened, pointing to the tied-up young woman. "You don't have to do this," said Raphael, trying to buy time. "We can resolve this another way." Tell me, why are you doing this? Haven't you realized yet, detective? It's all about knowledge, power. The Order of Shadows has always been here, waiting for the right moment. And now, with your help, we will reach the pinnacle of our power. Before Raphael could respond, a piercing sound cut through the air. A tear gas grenade rolled across the floor, exploding into a dense cloud. Raphael acted quickly, lunging at the man and wresting the detonator from him. The fight was intense, but Raphael managed to subdue him while Julia controlled the hooded figures. As the smoke cleared, Raphael untied the young woman, who was crying in relief. "It's all right now," he said softly. "You're safe." The police soon arrived, arresting the members of the Order of Shadows. As the agents led the hooded leader away, Raphael looked at him, knowing that despite the capture, there was much more to uncover. The case was far from resolved, and Raphael felt that he had only scratched the surface of something much deeper and more dangerous. The Shadows still held many secrets, and he was determined to unravel them, no matter the cost. Chapter 8: The Trap. The night moved slowly, bringing an unsettling silence over the city of Sao Paulo. At the precinct, Raphael watched the young woman rescued from the theater as she was examined by paramedics. Her eyes, still filled with fear, told a story of horror that he knew was far from over. Julia approached, bringing a cup of coffee for Raphael. "We got what we needed. Pedro and the girl are safe, and we have the leader of the Order of Shadows in custody." "Yes, but this is just the tip of the iceberg," replied Raphael, accepting the coffee. "They mentioned a ritual. This means there are more involved and probably more potential victims." Anna, the cryptographer, entered the room, holding a laptop. "Raphael, I found something interesting in the documents you brought from the farm. It looks like the Order was planning something big for tomorrow night. A final ritual at a specific location." Raphael looked at the digitized documents and maps. "Where?" "In the old tunnels beneath the city," said Anna, pointing to a spot on the map. "These tunnels date back to the colonial period and were used for smuggling and clandestine rituals. They believe it's a place of power." Raphael knew there was no time to lose. He assembled an elite team, including Julia and other experienced officers, to raid the tunnels. The operation needed to be swift and precise, with the element of surprise on their side. Arriving at the entrance to the tunnels, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The tunnels were dark and damp, with a smell of earth and mold that seemed to cling to the skin. Raphael led the team, his flashlight cutting through the darkness as they advanced. "Stay alert," he whispered. "These tunnels have many hiding spots and passages. We need to be ready for anything." As they moved forward, the sounds of voices and chanting began to echo through the walls. The light of torches indicated they were nearing the heart of the ritual. Suddenly, the team came upon a large underground chamber, illuminated by candles arranged in ritual patterns. In the center, a group of hooded figures was gathered around an improvised altar. A new victim, a woman tied and gagged, was about to be sacrificed. "Police! Hands up!" Raphael shouted, bursting into the chamber with his team. Chaos erupted. The members of the Order tried to flee, but Raphael's team was quick and efficient, overpowering them before they could react. Raphael rushed to the altar, untying the victim while Julia and the others subdued the cultists. "It's all right now," Raphael said to the woman, who wept with relief. "You're safe." As the cultists were taken into custody, Raphael examined the altar and the symbols around it. They had interrupted the ritual, but he knew the fight against the Order of Shadows was far from over. Back at the precinct, the leader of the Order, now unhooded, looked at Raphael with an enigmatic smile. You can capture us, detective, but you can't stop knowledge. The shadows will always exist, and we will return. Raphael knew he was right in a way. The shadows would always be there, waiting for someone willing to dive into them. But he also knew that as long as he was there to face them, the light would always have a chance. Chapter 9. The Final Confrontation. The sun began to rise on the horizon of Sao Paulo, bringing a slight breeze of relief after the intense operation in the tunnels. At the precinct, the atmosphere was still charged with tension as Raphael and his team dealt with the aftermath of the raid. The leader of the Order of Shadows, now without his hood, sat in a cell, a sinister smile on his lips. Raphael knew that this man was the key to uncovering the entire network behind the macabre rituals. "Is he ready to talk?" Raphael asked Martins, who was on duty in the interrogation room. "He's waiting for you," Martins replied, shaking his head. "Be careful, Raphael. This guy is more dangerous than he looks." Raphael entered the interrogation room, the cold white light illuminating the leader's face, who watched him with penetrating eyes. "So, detective, finally face to face," said the man in a smooth voice. "I am Arthur, but I'm sure you already knew that." "Arthur, you have a lot to explain," said Raphael, sitting across from him. "Why the rituals? What did you hope to achieve with these deaths?" Arthur laughed, a dry, cold laugh. "You still don't understand, do you? These rituals are just the beginning, a means to achieve true knowledge, something your limited mind could never comprehend." Raphael remained calm. "And who else is involved in this? Who are the other members of the Order?" Arthur smiled enigmatically. "The Order is bigger than you can imagine. We are everywhere, waiting for the right moment to resurface." Raphael knew he was dealing with a fanatic, someone who fervently believed in his twisted ideals. "You will pay for these deaths, Arthur, and I will make sure every member of your order is brought to justice." Arthur leaned forward, his eyes shining with a frightening intensity. "You can try, detective, but the shadows will always exist. You can only delay them, never eliminate them." As Raphael left the room, he knew that Arthur would not easily reveal the Order's secrets. He would need a different approach. Back in his office, he reviewed the documents and maps recovered, searching for any clue that might have been overlooked. Julia entered, bringing new information. "Raphael, we have something." Anna found a series of coded communications between Arthur and someone called the Grand Master. They mention a final meeting place, something about the Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel.
Rafael pondered.
This could be a metaphor or a specific location. We need to find out where this place is. The cryptography team worked tirelessly, deciphering the messages and finally locating the Tower of Babel, an old abandoned factory on the outskirts of the city. Raphael knew this would be the stage for the final confrontation. Arriving at the location, the abandoned factory looked like a sleeping monster. The weathered brick walls and broken windows gave a sense of desolation. Raphael, Julia, and an elite team prepared to enter, ready to face the unknown. Inside the factory, the silence was oppressive. Raphael led the group, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Step by step, they approached the heart of the mystery. Suddenly, the sounds of voices and chanting echoed through the corridors, leading them to a large room illuminated by torches. In the center, a hooded figure stood on a pedestal, surrounded by followers. "Welcome to the end times, detective," said the figure, revealing himself as the Grand Master. "You have arrived just in time to witness the rebirth of the Order." Raphael pointed his gun. "This ends here and now." The confrontation was intense. Gunshots echoed, followers of the Order trying to resist as Raphael's team advanced. Chaos ensued, but Raphael and Julia's determination prevailed. They finally subdued the Grand Master, putting an end to the leadership of the Order of Shadows. With the operation concluded, the sense of relief was palpable. Raphael looked around, seeing the Order's members being arrested and taken away. The shadows that had haunted the city were beginning to dissipate. On the way back to the precinct, Raphael reflected on everything that had happened. He knew that although this battle was won, the fight against the shadows would never end. But as long as there were people willing to fight, there would always be hope. Chapter 10: Resolution and Reflection. The operation at the old abandoned factory had been a success. The members of the Order of Shadows were arrested, and the leadership of the secret organization was dismantled. Sao Paulo could breathe a little easier, at least for now. At the precinct, the atmosphere was a mix of exhaustion and relief. Raphael watched his colleagues as they finished their reports and processed the prisoners. He knew that the victory over the Order of Shadows was significant, but he was also aware that the true enemies never rest. Raphael entered his office and collapsed into his chair, eyeing the piles of files on his desk. The fatigue was finally starting to take its toll. The door opened, and Julia walked in, bringing 2 cups of coffee. "You look exhausted," she said, handing a cup to Raphael. "Thank you," he replied, accepting the cup with a tired smile. "It's been a long night." "But we did it," said Julia, sitting in the chair across from him. "We dismantled the Order of Shadows and saved those people. It was a big step." "Yes, it was," Raphael agreed. "But there's still much to be done. There's always something lurking in the shadows, waiting." Julia smiled, understanding. "You've always been like this, Raphael, never stopping your search for the truth, even when you're exhausted." "It's the only way I know," he said, glancing at the photo of his wife Sophia on the desk. "I promised myself I wouldn't let anyone else suffer like she did." Julia looked at the photo and then back at Raphael. "Do you think the Order of Shadows had anything to do with her disappearance?"
Rafael Said.
"I don't know, but I won't stop looking until I find the truth." They sat in silence for a moment, both lost in their thoughts. The victory over the Order of Shadows was a relief but also a reminder that the fight against evil never ends. The shadows may recede, but they never completely disappear. That night, as Raphael prepared to go home, he reflected on the past few weeks. Every clue, every confrontation, every revelation had brought him closer to understanding the complexity of the evil he faced. And although he knew there was still much to be done, he felt more determined than ever to continue the fight. As he left the precinct, the night breeze of Sao Paulo was a reminder that the city was safe, at least for now. And as the city's lights shone in the darkness, Raphael knew that his mission was far from over. The shadows would always be there, but so would he, ready to face them.